I was just chatting with a buddy of mine who's been saving up for a new gaming rig, and he was stuck on the classic dilemma: do I splurge on a desktop and deal with the desk mess, or do I go for a laptop and hope it won't be a compromise? He'd been scrolling through endless spec sheets, feeling the pressure of a big-ticket price and the fear of ending up with something that can't keep up with the games he streams on Twitch. I told him, let's walk through what matters in the real world before you drop the cash. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the whole gaming laptop market is a balancing act. You get portable power, but you also inherit trade-offs like battery life, heat, and sometimes a screen that isn't quite the flagship you'd get on a desktop monitor. The HP Omen 16 AP000 lands squarely in the middle of that spectrum. It's positioned as a high-end 2025 model, so you naturally expect it to handle the latest titles without choking, and to be a decent workstation for video editing or 3D rendering when you're not gaming. The question is whether those expectations line up with what you actually need day-to-day. Let's start with the CPU. The AMD Ryzen 9 8940HX is a 16-core, 32-thread beast that, on paper, should dominate both games and creative workloads. In practice, that kind of core count shines when you're multitasking, say, running a game, having Discord open, and streaming on OBS all at once. I've seen users who run Photoshop, Premiere, and a game simultaneously on similar Ryzen 9 laptops without hitting a wall, thanks to the extra threads. For most gamers, the CPU isn't the bottleneck, it's the GPU, but having that kind of headroom does mean the laptop won't feel sluggish when you switch to heavy post-production tasks. Speaking of the GPU, the RTX 5060 is the next piece of the puzzle. It's not the RTX 4090, but it's a solid mid-range card that delivers smooth 1080p performance on most modern titles. In a real-world test I watched, Cyberpunk 2077 at medium-high settings hovered around 6070 frames per second on the Omen's 144Hz panel, which is more than enough to enjoy the game without dipping below the refresh rate. The same laptop handled Fortnite at max settings with 120 frames per second, and even the more demanding Elden Ring stayed above 55 frames per second on average. If you're the type who likes to crank everything up to ultra, you'll need to dial a few settings back, but the experience stays buttery for the price bracket. Memory and storage are where the practical day-to-day convenience really shows up. 16 GB of DDR5 runs at a speed that makes loading times feel instantaneous. I've seen load screens shrink from 12 seconds on older DDR4 machines to under 5 seconds here. The 512 GB SSD is fast, but it can feel tight if you're a game collector. Modern AAA titles often take 100 GB each, so after a few releases you'll be nudging the storage limit. The good news is the Omen has an extra M.2 slot, so you can add another drive later without opening a whole new system. For a user who primarily plays a rotating set of games and keeps a few creative projects on hand, the default SSD is fine. Anyone with a massive library should plan for that upgrade early. Now the display. A 16-inch 1920x1200 panel at 144 Hz is an interesting compromise. The extra vertical pixels give you a little more screen real estate than a strict 1080p 16:9 panel, which is handy for productivity. You can see more of a timeline in Premiere or more rows in a spreadsheet without scaling. The refresh rate, paired with the RTX 5060, makes fast shooters feel crisp. However, the color gamut isn't calibrated for professional photo work, so if you're a color-critical photographer you'll want an external monitor. Also, the screen's brightness caps around 300 nits, which is decent indoors but could struggle in bright rooms. Connectivity is where the Omen quietly wins. Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.3 mean low-latency online gaming and reliable peripheral connections. The port selection includes a full-size HDMI 2.1, a USB-C with DisplayPort support, 3 USB-A ports, and an Ethernet jack. That means you can plug straight into a 4K TV for couch gaming, or hook up a 144Hz monitor for a desktop-like setup without needing a dock. The inclusion of a dedicated Ethernet port is a nice nod to gamers who want the most stable connection possible. A practical downside that often flies under the radar is the battery life. With a Ryzen 9 and RTX 5060, the 76Wh battery barely makes it past 2 hours of heavy gaming, and maybe 5 to 6 hours if you're just browsing or streaming videos. That's typical for performance laptops, but it's worth noting if you plan to game on the go without a charger. The chassis is solid, but the Omen leans toward the heavier side. It's around 5.5 pounds, so it's portable in the sense you can move it from desk to couch, but not something you'll be happy to lug around campus all day.